Hello everyone, just an impromptu video on the subject of plastics. I have nothing against plastics. I don't have a lot of plastic figures. The only ones I've ever put together from memory have been Zulus. So I've used the Perry Twins Zulus, I've used the boxes from Warlord. Prefer the Perrys, I must say, over the Warlord. And now I am putting together some of these War Games Atlantic Imperial Conquest boxes. One of the good things about plastics is that you can build up these large armies. So you need a lot of figures for Zulus, you need a lot of figures for colonial conflicts in general, and yes, there are plenty of metal ranges out there, but they tend to be kind of limited. They might have a range that's composed of, say, 20 different figures, and obviously the in metal the stances are all the same, so after one purchase of 20 figures you're beginning to have to repeat the same stances, and they're more expensive, they're a lot heavier to carry around and transport, all kinds of things like that. So as I say, nothing against plastics, but I really find that I don't like their look, and I don't like this necessity of gluing arms and weapons and heads and things and so on them, for a number of reasons. So I found this kind of halfway through putting together this box. So I've got some that I stuck together yesterday here, and I'm now in the process of doing another sprue. It's sometime later in the year I'm going to do a video on the subject of aesthetics in general, and how that determines our wargaming choices in terms of all sorts of things, like the ranges we buy, whether we go for plastics or metal, whether we like, how we approach the subject of scale differences and differences in interpretations in scale and pose. But it goes on even further than that, to the rules that we like to play, to the people we like to play with, all kinds of things like that. Anyway, that's for a future video. But aesthetics does come into that in general. So here you have, on this box, you have a picture of really nice illustration of two boxes. It's going to give you some clues about how to paint as well, so that's always useful. There's nothing in the box, unlike with the Perry boxes in particular, which are brilliant for giving you flags and painting guides and all kinds of things. But this is how we would all imagine humans to look, not just boxers. But so look at this guy here with the Mandarin hat on. He's got a pistol in his left hand, sword raised above his head, holding it in his right hand. This is how you imagine it's going to look. That's how it turns out. Whatever you do with plastics, they always end up like, they're at a Saturday Night Fever disco, arms waving about almost haphazardly. You don't really have a lot of input into how the arms glue to the bodies. They're bound. That very few of them end up with the hands close to their sides. The ones in here I found work out the best is things like this one, where they've got a weapon and they're holding it with both hands. That looks quite natural to me. So there's one there. They have a problem in their own right, in that you're gluing the arms on separately, and you have to be careful to try and glue the arms so that the weapon is going to fit into both hands. It's attached to one hand, but you still have to be a little bit careful that you line them up, so that it looks like the weapon is, so you can get the weapon into the grip of both hands essentially. But they just don't look. There's the sort of thing I'm talking about. Aesthetics. It's partly, and it's partly about proportionality and so on. And yes, that might be a pose that one particular person in a mob ends up it, but when they're all like that, then it begins to jar on the eye. So yeah, there is a big downside to plastics. The other thing that's happening with is that you start off with a sprue. Let's find one that I haven't been working on so far. You start off with a sprue like this, and it's a little bit bewildering to begin with. You get to know after working on one sprue, what's on the sprue and various combinations of weapons and shields and so on that you can use, but you do have to be careful. You have to keep a close eye out that you're not sticking a left arm on the right hand side or vice versa, that kind of thing. And then you begin to take stock a little bit more about what your choices are. I mean, for instance, the only pistol is actually being held in a left hand, as per that cover art and the cover photograph. So you have to be careful. Not that it would work very easily anyway, but because you have the gun upside down. But things where there is nothing in either hand, you have left and right arms where the hand is empty. So you have to be a little bit more careful in that respect. I mean, for instance, here there are two short swords, but they are actually, one is in the left hand and one is in the right hand, so you can end up with a figure. There's one there. You can end up with a figure that has a sword in both hands, is kind of using it it's almost like a martial arts pose, which I like, because the boxers were called boxers because they did practice exercises and training and martial art type training. But what I'm trying to say is, in the end, you begin to get to a point where you're beginning to sort of question your own intelligence and so on, and it begins to flummox you. And one of the things that's got me particularly flummoxed with this set, because basically you're trying to kind of plan in advance so that you make best use of the entirety of all 6 sprues. So you have to have a little bit of planning in advance. And one of the things it says on the box cover is you can build up to 10 figures in the box as the famous Kanzu Braves. Now, I'm not planning to do that, but essentially you would have to find the bodies that have this kind of apron on them. So there are actually 3. There are 5 figures on each sprue, and there are 3 that have that apron. That's one, that's another one, and there is another one. I've looked at it. I'm sure this is what I mean about how you end up kind of going mad. Let's try and get the magnifying glass on it. 1, 2, No, I beg your pardon. There are only two. Yeah, there are only two figures on each sprue that have that apron, but there are 6 sprues. That makes 12 figures, and there are far more than 2 heads on the sprue that have the turban that the Kansu Braves used as well. That means you can build up to 10 Kansu Braves, surely not. Sorry, up to 12 Kansu Braves, surely not 10. And yet they say 10 on the box, and it just begins to add all those little extra doubts about whether you're putting these pieces on appropriate or not. It's a frustrating process, and I'm not particularly enjoying it. At the end of the day, I'm going to end up with a large army full of boxers flapping their arms about, you know. So the goal is half worth getting to, and half I'm sort of not particularly satisfied with. Anyway, that's my feeling about plastics. I'm more of a traditionalist. I'd much rather there were a lot more metal figures out there in order for you to be able to build up an army without having to resort to plastics. It's going to take you years to get armies of that size anyway, so you know the expense isn't as much of an issue as you might think, because you're going to pay for it very slowly as you build your army up over the years. Yeah, anyway, I'm not a dinosaur. I don't object to plastics. I just don't think they look as good as metal. And you know, it's all about proportionality. And I mean, for instance, I was saying earlier about aesthetics, you know, determining the rules that you choose. You couldn't use these figures in a rule set like Black Powder, because you'd have to base them on multiple bases and they look crazy. You'd have to work really hard with the sprues to actually get a group of figures together on a base that looked convincing. You know, looked as though they were working in harmony, in you know, with a shared purpose, rather than each doing their own separate dance, you know, in close proximity to the next. Anyway, I'll stop whining and just leave you to think about that. Thanks for watching.